The massive chamber stretched far beyond what human eyes could see. Strange lights danced across walls made of living crystal, and the air itself seemed to hum with ancient power. Lisa Torres stood in the center of it all, trying not to show how small she felt. Around her, creatures from nightmares and dreams filled floating platforms and energy fields. Some looked like giant insects with too many eyes. Others were made of gas and light, barely holding together in forms that hurt to look at directly. A few resembled trees that moved and thought, their bark-like skin crackling as they shifted position. They were all laughing at her. Lisa had expected this moment to be difficult. Earth had sent their best diplomat to ask for something that had never been given before. Humanity wanted to join the Galactic Council, the group that ruled most of the known universe. But she had not expected the laughter to be so cruel. 70 years, said the creature called Zephyr, his voice coming from 7 different mouths at once. If you are very lucky, you might live 70 of your tiny years. How pathetic. Zephyr was the council leader, a being made of living crystal that had watched entire star systems being born. His body was tall as a building and covered in sharp edges that caught the light. When he moved, it sounded like mountains breaking apart. We have been alive for thousands of your years, added another voice from across the room. This one belonged to something called a Velinary, a snake-like creature that floated in the air without wings. Her name was High Priestess Shalmaya, and her scales changed colors as she spoke. My youngest memory is older than your entire species. What could you possibly teach us? More laughter filled the chamber. Lisa felt her face grow hot, but she kept her voice steady. Honored council members, we know our lives are short compared to yours, but perhaps there is value in that difference. Behind her, Captain Jake Morrison clenched his fists. He was supposed to stay quiet during the diplomatic meeting, but watching these ancient monsters mock his species made his blood boil. Jake had fought in 3 wars and seen good people die defending Earth. These creatures talked about human lives like they were jokes. Value? The word came from something that looked like a cloud of angry gas. High Archon Nexus had no real body, just a mass of energy that spoke through machines. Child, we have watched your kind for barely a heartbeat of cosmic time. You fight over scraps. You died before you learned anything useful. You are insects, playing at being intelligent. Dr. Alan Carter stepped forward, holding a small device that showed numbers and charts. With respect, your records show 17 major threats to all galactic life in the past 1,000 years. How many did you solve without help from younger species? The laughter stopped. For a moment, the chamber was quiet except for the humming of ancient machines. Dr. Carter had touched on something the council did not like to discuss. Despite all their power and wisdom, they had not been very good at handling emergencies. That is not relevant, Zephyr said, but his voice sounded less confident than before. We survive. We endure. That is what matters in the end. But do you really live? Lisa asked softly. The question hung in the air like smoke. Some of the council members shifted uncomfortably. Others made sounds that might have been anger or confusion. Living and surviving were not the same thing. And somehow this young human had pointed out a truth they had been avoiding for centuries. High Priestess Shalmaya recovered first, her scales turning dark red. How dare you question our existence, Mayfly? We have built civilizations that span galaxies. We have created art that has lasted for millennia. We have achieved true immortality. When was the last time you created something new? Dr. Carter asked, still looking at his device. Not improved something old or refined an existing idea, but truly created something that had never existed before. Again, uncomfortable silence. When was the last time any of you took a real risk? Lisa continued. Made a decision quickly because time was running out? Felt the excitement of not knowing what would happen next? Silence! Zephyr's voice shook. The entire chamber. We did not grant you an audience to be insulted by creatures who barely exist long enough to understand the universe. But Lisa was not finished. She had come here knowing this might be humanity's only chance, and she would not waste it being polite to beings who saw her people as less than nothing. You call us mayflies, she said, her voice growing stronger. You mock us for living short lives. But in our brief time, we have gone from caves to space travel. We have created music that makes people cry, stories that inspire entire worlds, and inventions that change everything. What have you done lately? The chamber erupted in angry sounds. Some council members demanded the humans be thrown out immediately. Others called for punishment. But a few, the younger ones who had not yet learned to fear change, stayed quiet and listened. High Archon Nexus materialized a more solid form, something like a giant made of storm clouds. Your application for council membership is denied. Permanently. You will return to your small world and stay there? The galaxy has no need for creatures who burn out before they can contribute anything meaningful. Furthermore, added Zephyr, any attempt to contact other council species without permission will be considered an act of war. You will remain isolated until you prove you can survive long enough to matter. Lisa felt her heart sink, but she kept her face calm. This was what they had expected, but it still hurt to hear it spoken so coldly. We understand your decision, she said with dignity that impressed even some of her enemies. We will return to Earth and inform our people. As the human delegation prepared to leave, Dr. Carter made one final action that none of the council members noticed. He uploaded a data package to the Galactic Communication Network, files that appeared to be simple cultural exchanges. Music, art, literature, and historical records from Earth. Hidden within these innocent files were detailed studies of human military tactics, psychological profiles of species under pressure, and most importantly, case studies of what humans could accomplish when their backs were against the wall. The council had made their first mistake. They had assumed that because humans live short lives, they could not be dangerous. They had forgotten that the most desperate creatures were often the most innovative ones. As the humans walked away from the chamber, Jake Morrison whispered to Lisa, "That went about as well as we expected." "Better, actually," she replied quietly. "They showed us exactly what they are. Ancient, proud, and completely unprepared for anything that moves faster than they do." Dr. Carter checked his device one more time. The cultural files are already spreading through their networks. Young members of dozens of species are downloading human music and stories. They don't know it yet, but we just planted seeds that will grow into something they never saw coming. "How long do we have?" Lisa asked. 6 months, maybe less. Carter replied, "Either we find a way to change their minds or we prepare for the consequences of defying them." As their ship left the council station, none of the immortal beings inside realized that they had just made enemies of the most dangerous type of creature in the universe. Intelligent beings with nothing left to lose and not enough time to waste. On being careful, the age of immortal dominance had begun its countdown to extinction, and the clock was ticking faster than beings who measured time in centuries could possibly imagine. 6 months had passed since the council rejected humanity. The immortal beings thought they had solved their human problem by sending the troublesome species back to their small world. They were wrong. Commander Steve Walsh floated in the control room of a hidden base built inside a large asteroid. The base was invisible to most scanners, hidden between two gas giant planets where no one would think to look. Around him, dozens of human officers worked at glowing screens, coordinating the most ambitious plan in human history. "Report," Steve said to his communications officer. Lieutenant Carlos Martinez looked up with a big smile on his face. "Sir, we have good news from 17 different star systems. The cultural exchange program is working better than we hoped." Steve nodded. The plan was simple but clever. Humans had learned something important about immortal species during their research. When you live forever, you stop trying new things. Why create new music when you have eternity to listen to old songs? Why write new stories when you have thousands of years to read existing books? Why invent new games when the old ones work fine? But human culture was different. Because humans lived such short lives, they created things quickly and with great passion. Their music was full of emotion. Their stories were exciting and intense. Their art captured feelings that immortal beings had forgotten they could have. The cultural files that Dr. Carter had uploaded were spreading through the galactic networks like wildfire. Young aliens who had lived for centuries were suddenly discovering something they had never experienced before: excitement on the Velinary homeworld. A junior diplomat named Sithara sat in her office humming a strange melody. It was something called blues music from Earth, and it made her feel emotions she did not know she had. The music talked about pain and loss and hope in ways that made her snake-like body shiver with recognition. "What is that terrible noise?" asked her supervisor, an ancient Velinary who had lived for 3,000 years. "It is called music," Sithara replied, not stopping her humming. "The humans make it to express their feelings about life?" "Feelings?" The supervisor made a sound. "Like spitting?" "Emotions are for children. We outgrow such things after our first century." But Sithara was no longer listening. She had discovered something wonderful in these human songs, something her people had lost long ago. She began secretly sharing the music with other young Velinary, who passed it along to their friends on other worlds. Meanwhile, in the crystal cities of Zephyr's people, something even more dangerous was happening. Young crystal beings were gathering in hidden places to discuss human philosophy. The idea that life should be measured by intensity instead of length was revolutionary to creatures who expected to live for thousands of years. "Why should we spend our first 3 centuries in silent meditation?" asked a young crystal being named Kethelin. "The humans accomplish more in 1 decade than we do in 10 centuries. Perhaps they know something we do not." "Because that is how it has always been done," replied an elder. "Patience is wisdom, haste is folly." "But is patience still wisdom when it means nothing ever changes?" Kethelin asked. This question spread through the crystal cities like cracks in glass. Young beings who had never questioned the old ways began to wonder if there might be better approaches to living. On a research station orbiting Nexus Prime, Dr. Rachel Stone worked quietly in her laboratory. Officially, she was studying alien biology. In reality, she was conducting the most important psychological research in galactic history. Her findings were disturbing. After living for thousands of years, most immortal beings entered what she called emotional hibernation. They stopped feeling strongly about anything. They went through the motions of living without actually being alive. They had traded passion for safety, growth for stability. "They are not really immortal," she reported during a secret communication with Earth. "They are stuck. They have forgotten how to live because they think they have unlimited time to waste." But the most important discovery came from Jenny Murphy, a young teacher who had volunteered for what everyone thought was a hopeless mission. She had made contact with something the immortal societies tried to hide. The forgotten. These were younger members of various alien species who had been cast out from their civilizations. Their crime was simple. They still had emotions. They still wanted to create new things, explore unknown places, and change the world around them. In immortal societies, such behavior was considered a mental illness. The forgotten lived in hidden communities on the edges of civilized space. They had been alone and hopeless for centuries, thinking they were defective because they could not accept the slow, careful pace of immortal life. Jenny found them and gave them something precious: hope. "You are not broken," she told a gathering of forgotten from dozens of different species. "You are exactly what the galaxy needs. You still remember how to truly live." She shared human stories with them, tales of people who changed the world in short lifetimes through determination and creativity. She taught them human concepts of revolution and rapid change. Most importantly, she showed them that they were not alone. The forgotten began calling themselves the Brief Candles, adopting the human philosophy that a life's worth was measured by its impact, not its length. They formed secret networks across the galaxy, communicating through hidden channels and preparing for something that had never happened before in galactic history, a revolution measured in months instead of centuries. Back on the hidden asteroid base, Commander Steve Walsh received reports that seemed too good to be true. The cultural infiltration was working beyond their wildest dreams. Immortal societies were experiencing internal conflicts as their youth began questioning traditions. that had existed for millennia. "Sir," reported Intelligence Officer Marcus Cole, "we have confirmation that 17 different species are experiencing what their leaders call civil unrest. Young beings are refusing traditional roles, demanding faster decision-making processes, and openly criticizing their elders." Steve smiled grimly. "And their leaders? Completely unprepared. They have no experience dealing with rapid social change. Some are calling emergency councils that will take months to reach conclusions. Others are trying to suppress the unrest through traditional methods that move too slowly to be effective. The beauty of the human plan was its speed. While immortal, leaders held long meetings to discuss how to respond to the crisis. Human operatives and their new allies were already moving to the next phase of their operation. Dr. Carter had established hidden research stations throughout the galaxy, staffed by humans and sympathetic aliens who studied immortal weaknesses with scientific precision. They discovered that beings accustomed to unlimited time became paralyzed when forced to make quick decisions. Creatures who had spent centuries perfecting their responses to every situation could not adapt. When faced with truly new problems, they are like ancient trees, explained Dr. Carter during a strategy meeting. Very strong, very stable, but completely unable to bend when the wind changes direction. And we are going to be a hurricane. The Immortal Council still did not understand what was happening. They saw the unrest among their youth as a temporary problem that would solve itself given enough time. They could not imagine that creatures with such short lives could organize anything truly dangerous. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Captain Jake Morrison, now commanding a fleet of fast, invisible ships, prepared for the next phase of the operation. All units, this is command. Operation Wildfire begins in 72 hours. Remember, we are not trying to destroy their civilizations. We are trying to wake them up. The galaxy was about to discover that the most dangerous enemies were not those who had unlimited time to plan perfect strategies, but those who had learned to make every second count in the brief time they had. The age of immortal dominance was ending, and none of the ancient beings saw it coming until it was far too late to stop. The council chamber had never seen anything like it. For 10,000 years, meetings had followed the same pattern. Ancient beings would speak slowly and carefully, taking hours to make simple points. Decisions were reached through long discussions that could last for months. Everything was calm, orderly, and predictable. Not today. Zeph single quotes Tar was in the middle of reading a report about stardust collection when his personal assistant interrupted him. Kethelin, a young crystal being who had served him faithfully for 2 centuries, suddenly stood up from her position and spoke in a voice that rang through the entire chamber. "Honored leader, I quit," she announced. "I am done wasting my life counting dust particles while the galaxy burns around us. I am joining the Brief Candles movement, and I'm going to make my existence mean something." The silence that followed was complete. In the entire recorded history of the Council, no assistant had ever quit their position. The idea was so shocking that several ancient beings actually stopped breathing for a moment, but Kethelin was not finished. "Furthermore, I call upon all young beings in this chamber to remember what it feels like to be alive. We have become zombies, going through the motions of existence without actually living. The humans have shown us a better way." Before Zephyr could respond, similar declarations came from all over the chamber. Young assistants, junior diplomats, and minor officials from dozens of different species stood up and announced their intention to leave their traditional roles. "I refuse to spend the next 800 years organizing library files," declared a young Velinari. "I will not waste another century polishing ceremonial objects," added a gaseous being from the outer rim. "We demand the right to make decisions quickly and pursue meaningful work," shouted a tree-like creature whose bark was glowing with excitement. High Archon Nexus tried to restore order by manifesting his emergency form, a massive cloud of angry energy that filled a quarter of the chamber. "What is the meaning of this chaos? Have you all contracted some form of temporal madness?" "We have been awakened," replied Sithara. the young Velinary diplomat who had been secretly organizing resistance cells for months. The humans showed you as something we had forgotten. Existence without purpose is just a fancy form of death. The word death sent shockwaves through the immortal beings. It was a concept they had tried to forget, something that happened to lesser creatures, but never to them. The idea that their endless lives might be a form of death was terrifying. Council leader Zephyr raised all 7 of his arms, his crystal body flashing with anger. Guards, arrest these rebels immediately. They will be sentenced to imprisonment until they remember their proper place. But when he looked for his guards, half of them had already removed their ceremonial armor and stood with the rebels. The other half looked confused and uncertain, unsure whether they should obey orders that seemed suddenly old and meaningless. Captain Helen Brooks stepped forward from among the former guards. She was human, and she had been working undercover in the Council's security forces for months. In her hands was a plasma rifle aimed directly at Zephyr's central crystal core. "I am afraid the humans have taught us something else," she said in a calm voice that somehow carried to every corner of the huge chamber. Sometimes change requires force. The revelation hit the Council like a physical blow. Humans had not just been spreading culture through their networks. They had been placing operatives in the most secure and sacred institutions of immortal civilization. The beings who were supposed to be too short-lived to matter had been playing a long game. Right under their ancient noses, Dr. Carter appeared from behind a pillar where he had been hiding, flanked by a dozen human soldiers who had somehow infiltrated the most heavily guarded location in the galaxy. His scientific mind was still fascinated by what he was observing. "The psychological warfare component worked exactly as predicted," he said, speaking to his hidden communication device. "Immortal beings who have never experienced rapid change are completely unprepared for social revolution. They literally do not know how to respond when their carefully ordered world starts moving faster than they can think." But the real terror came when Intelligence Chief Marcus Cole revealed the full scope of human infiltration. He activated a holographic display that showed the position of human operatives throughout the galaxy. Red dots appeared on star maps, each one representing a human agent or a cell of Brief Candle's rebels. There were thousands of them. "You see," Marcus explained to the shocked council members, his voice carrying the cold efficiency of someone who knew time was precious. "Immortals think in geological time. You make plans that take centuries to implement. You respond to threats after careful consideration that lasts for years. You assume that because you have unlimited time, everyone else will wait for you to make up your minds." He gestured to the holographic display, which now showed human positions in 47 different star systems. "While you spent 6 months debating whether to take our membership application seriously, we established operational bases throughout your territory. We recruited allies among your discontented youth. We identified every weak point in your infrastructure. We studied your psychology, your military capabilities, and your decision-making processes." The truth hit the immortal leaders like a meteor impact. Their greatest strength had become their fatal weakness. Because they lived forever, they had assumed they could take forever to respond to threats. They had become slow, predictable, and vulnerable to enemies who moved at speeds they could not comprehend. "Impossible," whispered High Priestess Shalmaya, her scales turning pale with fear. "You are mayflies. You live for barely a moment. How could you plan something so complex?" Colonel Danny Wright, the human military advisor, smiled without warmth. "That is exactly why we could do it. We do not have the luxury of unlimited time. Every day matters to us. Every hour counts. While you were having committee meetings about our application, we were fighting for our species' survival." The scope of human preparation became clear as more reports came in. Human agents had been studying immortal communication systems, which were designed for beings who could wait months for messages to be delivered. They had mapped supply lines that had not been updated in centuries because immortal planners assumed nothing important would change quickly. They had identified command structures that were so ancient and rigid that they could not adapt to unexpected situations. "What do you want?" Zephyr asked, his voice barely a whisper. For the first time in his 10,000-year life, he felt something he had never experienced before, genuine fear. "What we have always wanted," Lisa Tara said as she entered the chamber with a full human diplomatic team. "Recognition, respect, a seat at the table where decisions about the galaxy are made." Her expression hardened as she looked at the beings who had mocked her just months before. "And a guarantee that you will never again mistake brevity for weakness, or assume that creatures with short lives cannot accomplish great things." High Archon Nexus tried one final time to assert authority. "You cannot threaten us. We are immortal. We have survived for millennia. We will outlast your brief lives and return things to proper order. Will you?" asked Dr. Rachel Stone as she joined the group, "because our psychological studies suggest otherwise. Immortal beings under extreme stress exhibit complete cognitive breakdown. You have never had to make decisions under pressure. You have never had to adapt quickly to changing circumstances. You're like ancient computers trying to run modern software. You simply cannot keep up." As if to prove her point, several council members began showing signs of what human psychologists called temporal shock. Beings who had lived for thousands of years started making strange sounds and repetitive movements, unable to process the rapid changes happening around them. The age of immortal dominance was ending not with a great battle, but with the simple realization that creatures who had unlimited time had forgotten how to use time effectively. Humanity had won by doing what they did best, making every moment count in the brief time they had available. The galaxy would never be the same. The siege of the Eternal Citadel lasted exactly 72 hours. For beings who measured conflicts in centuries, this was impossible to understand. General Patricia Hayes commanded the human forces from the bridge of the warship Defiance, coordinating attacks across 18 star systems while immortal commanders were still trying to organize their first emergency meeting. "Status report," Patricia called out as she walked through the command center. Her boots clicked against the metal floor with the rhythm of someone who had no time to waste. "Nexus Prime's main computer system is down," reported communications. Officer Tim Russell. "Their entire government network is paralyzed. They cannot send orders to their military forces. The Velinary Home Fleet is asking to surrender," added Navigation Officer Amy Foster. "Apparently they have never seen anything move this fast before. Their admirals are having nervous breakdowns trying to keep up with our tactics." The speed of human operations had shocked every immortal species in the galaxy. Traditional immortal warfare involved massive ships that moved slowly through space, following battle plans that had been developed over decades. Conflicts were expected to last for years, with plenty of time for negotiation and careful strategy. Human warfare was completely different. Lieutenant Scott Thompson had developed new fighting methods that used small, fast ships instead of giant, slow ones. These human fighters could change their battle plans in minutes instead of months. They attacked and disappeared before enemy commanders could even understand what was happening. "Sector 7 is reporting complete victory," said Major Carol Davis, from her position at the tactical display. "The Immortal Defense Fleet tried to form their traditional battle formation, but it takes them 6 hours to get organized. We hit them in the first 20 minutes and destroyed half their ships before they knew we were there." But the most effective weapon was not military at all. Dr. Jonathan Price had discovered something he called the immortal paradox. When beings who had unlimited time were forced to make quick decisions, they simply broke down mentally. Thousands of years of slow, careful thinking had not prepared them for situations that required immediate action. "They are surrendering faster than we can accept the surrenders," reported Captain Tony Martinez from the Outer Rim territories. "Entire planetary governments are stepping down rather than try to fight a war that moves this fast. They would rather give up than attempt to make rapid decisions." "The Crystal Cities of Zephyr homeworld just sent a message," announced Lieutenant Sarah Adams. "They are offering complete submission if we promise to slow down our attacks to a pace they can." "Understand." General Hayes allowed herself a small smile. The immortal beings were discovering that their greatest strength was also their greatest weakness. Living forever had made them careful and slow. They had forgotten how to act quickly when quick action was needed. In the highest tower of the Eternal Citadel, the surviving council members sat in stunned silence. Ancient beings who had ruled the galaxy for millennia found themselves completely helpless against an enemy that moved faster than they could think. Ambassador Lisa Torres entered the chamber with a team of human negotiators. She was the same woman they had mocked and dismissed just months before. Now she stood before them as the representative of the victorious side, but her expression was not cruel or angry. She looked almost sad. "We are not conquerors," she said to the defeated immortals. "We do not want to destroy your civilizations or take over your worlds. We want partnership. We want to work together to build something better than what either of us could create alone." High Archon Nexus, his gaseous form flickering with distress, spoke through his communication device. "Partnership? You have destroyed 10,000 years of careful order in 3 days. You have turned our own children against us with your dangerous ideas about rapid change and emotional extremes." Dr. Carter stepped forward, his scientific curiosity still strong even in this moment of victory. "With respect, High Archon, your careful order had become stagnation. In the past 1,000 years, how many new technologies have your civilizations developed? How many new art forms have been created? How many new ideas have emerged?" The silence that followed was the answer. The immortal civilizations had stopped growing centuries ago. They had become museums of their own past achievements, preserved perfectly but no longer alive. Commander Steve Walsh, fresh from his successful operations in the Rim territories, addressed the council with surprising gentleness. "We do not expect you to abandon everything you have built. Your wisdom and knowledge are valuable, but immortality without growth is not really living. We are offering you something you have forgotten how to achieve on your own: genuine progress." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Kethalin, the young crystal being who had been among the first to join the rebellion, stood before her former leader Zephyr with a proposal that would change everything. "Honored ancient Zephyr," she said, her crystal body glowing with new purpose, "what if we could combine immortal wisdom with mortal urgency? What if we could learn to live with both the patience of eternity and the passion of brief life?" Captain Helen Brooks nodded in agreement. "Exactly, we are not asking you to become mortal. We are asking you to remember how to truly live. You can keep your long lives, but use them to accomplish great things instead of just existing." The terms of the new Galactic Compact were negotiated and signed within 1 week. This was a speed of treaty-making that broke every record in galactic history. For immortal beings accustomed to century-long negotiations, it was like trying to catch lightning. The compact established several revolutionary principles. First, all major galactic decisions would be made by mixed councils that included both immortal wisdom and mortal urgency. Second, no single species would dominate galactic affairs simply because they lived longer than others. Third, all civilizations would commit to continuous growth and innovation instead of endless preservation of old ways. Most importantly, the compact recognized something that had never been acknowledged before: that different lifespans brought different, valuable perspectives to solving problems. Immortal beings could provide deep knowledge and long-term thinking. Mortal beings could provide creativity, adaptability, and the urgency needed to actually implement solutions. "The key insight," explained Dr. Rachel Stone during the signing ceremony, "is that the most dangerous threats to galactic civilization require both types of thinking. Immortals can see the big picture, but mortals can act quickly enough to address immediate crises." As the various species signed the historic agreement, it became clear that the galaxy had fundamentally changed. The Brief Candles movement had evolved into something greater, a philosophical revolution that spread across species boundaries. Beings who had existed for millennia were suddenly pursuing goals they had put off for centuries, creating art they had only imagined, and forming relationships they had assumed could wait indefinitely. We have given them something they did not know they had lost, observed Professor Nancy Wilson, who would soon establish the new galactic university where immortal knowledge would be combined with human innovation. We have given them back their sense of urgency, their ability to care about the present moment. But perhaps the most profound change was in humanity itself. No longer the brief mayflies mocked by ancient civilizations, humans had found their place as the galaxy's catalysts. They were the beings whose short lives brought energy and innovation to immortal wisdom and patience. General Hayes concluded her final military report with words that would be remembered for thousands of years. They used to mock us for living such short lives. Now they understand that the secret is not how long you live, but how much life you pack into the time you have. The galaxy had learned to fear not death, but wasted time. And in teaching that lesson, humanity had earned something more valuable than immortality. They had earned genuine respect from beings who would remember their contribution. Long after the last human had died, the secret the immortals had discovered was both simple and terrifying. The most dangerous beings in the universe were not those who had unlimited time to plan, but those who had learned to make every second count. 1 year after the signing of the new Galactic Compact, the galaxy was a completely different place. The Grand Assembly Hall, once a monument to slow, immortal decision-making where simple choices took months to finalize, now buzzed with energy. As mixed councils combined immortal wisdom with mortal urgency. Director Kelly Adams ran the new Emergency Response Center from Earth's first permanent galactic embassy. Her office walls showed live feeds from dozens of worlds where human immortal teams were solving problems that had been ignored for centuries. The crystal plague that had been spreading through Zephyrian space for 200 years, she reported during her weekly communication with Earth Command, solved in 6 months once we combined their geological knowledge with our medical research. Methods, the veterinary trade route disputes that had been stuck in legal proceedings for 3 centuries, resolved in 2 weeks using human conflict resolution techniques. The transformation had not been easy. Dr. Alan Carter had established the Integration Psychology Institute to help immortal beings adapt to faster decision-making processes. Many ancient leaders needed therapy to overcome what doctors called temporal paralysis, the inability to act when you could not take forever to think about every choice. The fear is very real, explained Dr. Catherine Bell, who worked directly with recovering immortals. Imagine having infinite time to make perfect decisions, then suddenly being asked to make good decisions quickly. For many of them, it feels like asking someone who has never run to suddenly compete in a race. But the successes far outweighed the problems. Admiral Jake Morrison, formerly captain of the Earth Defense Force, had completely changed galactic military strategy. The old system of massive, slow-moving fleets had been replaced by rapid response forces that could defend multiple star systems at the same time. The Devourer swarm that threatened the outer spiral colonies, he reported during a military briefing. Traditional immortal strategy would have required 50 years of preparation followed by a century-long siege. We mobilized our forces in 6 days, fought for 2 weeks, and eliminated the entire threat. The key was teaching immortal strategists that sometimes good enough executed immediately beats perfect delivered too late. Perhaps the most remarkable change occurred in what historians called the Cultural Renaissance. Young immortals, inspired by human concepts of artistic urgency and emotional intensity, began creating at speeds that amazed their elders. Sithara, the former Velinary diplomat, had become the galaxy's most celebrated composer, creating symphonies that captured both immortal patience and mortal passion. I used to think I had forever to write the perfect song, she explained during an interview. But the humans taught me that the perfect song is the one that moves people right now, not the one that might be perfect someday. The Brief Candles movement had grown into something much larger, a philosophical revolution that crossed all species boundaries. Beings who had lived for millennia were suddenly pursuing dreams they had put off for centuries, creating art they had only imagined and forming relationships they had assumed could wait indefinitely. We have given them something they did not know they had lost, observed Professor Nancy Wilson, who directed the new galactic university where immortal knowledge was combined with human innovation. We have given them back their sense of now, their ability to live in the present moment instead of just existing through it. But the transformation was not limited to immortal species. Humanity itself had changed in profound ways. No longer the brief mayflies mocked by ancient civilizations, humans had found their true place in the galaxy as catalysts for change and growth. Captain Carlos Martinez, now commanding the exploration vessel Pioneer, explained it perfectly during a routine survey mission in uncharted space. They used to mock us for living such short lives. Now they understand that maybe the secret is not how long you live, but how much meaning you pack into the time you have. The new galactic government worked through what were called synthesis councils. Each council included both immortal beings, who could provide long-term perspective, and mortal beings who could push for immediate action. The combination produced results that neither group could have achieved alone. Take the refugee crisis in the Andromeda border region, explained Council Coordinator Beth Morgan. The immortal members provided detailed historical analysis of similar situations and proposed sustainable long-term solutions. The mortal members pushed for immediate humanitarian aid and rapid implementation of emergency measures. Together, we solved in 3 months what previous councils would have debated for 3 years. The psychological changes in immortal species were the most fascinating aspect of the transformation. Dr. Rachel Stone's research showed that exposure to mortal urgency had actually reversed the emotional hibernation that many ancient beings had fallen into. It is remarkable, she reported. Immortals who had not felt strong emotions in centuries are suddenly experiencing joy, excitement, even healthy anxiety again. The presence of mortals who care deeply about immediate outcomes has reminded them what it feels like to care about anything. The military applications of human-immortal cooperation had revolutionized galactic defense. General Patricia Hayes commanded joint forces that combined immortal strategic knowledge with human tactical flexibility. The result was a defense system that could handle both long-term threats and immediate crises. The beauty of the system, she explained, is that immortals can plan for threats that might develop over centuries, while humans can respond to attacks that happen right now. Neither approach alone was sufficient, but together they cover every possible scenario. Economic cooperation had produced similar breakthroughs. Immortal beings had vast resources and deep knowledge of galactic trade patterns, but they made business decisions so slowly that opportunities were often lost. Human entrepreneurs provided the speed and adaptability needed to turn immortal assets into active prosperity. Immortal-owned companies that had been stagnant for decades suddenly became profitable when they hired human managers, reported economic analyst Robert Taylor. The immortals provided capital and long-term stability, while humans provided innovation and rapid adaptation to market changes. The most visible symbol of the new galactic order was the motto that had been inscribed in the ancient council chambers, Tempus Vita, time of life. It served as a reminder that true success was not about surviving forever, but about making every moment, whether brief or eternal, count for something meaningful. Young immortals often wore jewelry or clothing with the motto, while human diplomats used it to end their speeches. It had become a rallying cry for beings across the galaxy who believe that life should be measured by accomplishment rather than duration. The galaxy has learned something important, reflected Ambassador Lisa Torres during the first anniversary celebration of the Compact. The most dangerous beings in the universe are not those who live the longest, but those who make the best use of whatever time they have. But perhaps the most profound change was in how different species viewed time itself. Immortals had learned to value the present moment, while humans had gained appreciation for long-term consequences. The galaxy had discovered that wisdom came not from having unlimited time, but from understanding how to use time effectively. Lieutenant Tim Russell, working on a joint exploration mission with crystal beings, summed up the transformation perfectly. We used to think immortals were lucky because they had forever. They used to think we were cursed because we had so little time. Now we all understand that time is not about quantity. It is about quality. It is about making every day matter, whether you have 70 years or 70,000. The secret that had terrified the immortals was no longer a secret. It had become the foundation of a new galactic civilization where the desperate creativity of mortal beings combined with the deep wisdom of immortal ones to create something greater than either could achieve alone. In a universe where most species had measured progress in millennia, humanity had taught the galaxy to measure it in moments. And in those moments, everything had changed forever.